Welcome into the Auto Trader pregame show. Chris Miles here with David Griffin, Brennan Hayward. Hey, the Spurs and the Thunder rematch in Thursday night's game, and LaMarcus Aldridge in that Thursday night game put up a career-high 56 points. Spurs hit their first 14 three-pointers.
Wow.
And tonight we get an encore between those two teams. Oh, man, this should be an exciting one. What are you looking most forward to seeing, Griff?
Well, I think it's fascinating that since December 1st, OKC was the second best, most efficient defensive team in the league, and San Antonio had been seventh in that span. And then they play the first game of this series and go 154, 147. So there was no defense played whatsoever. I think it's going to be fascinating to see if OKC can do a better job of containing the post game of San Antonio, because I really felt like that got all of their shooters rolling a little bit.
And I'm glad you were talking about that because you're getting pretty good at this media thing. That's a perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about. I see what you're doing here.
It's a pass.
Yes, it is. It's an assist, something that LaMarcus Aldridge isn't known to do in his career, and that is what I think that the OKC Thunder need to do as far as guarding LaMarcus. You want to show him different looks, force him into being a passer, whether that's giving him a crowded lane where you fake the double or make the lane look very, very crowded and do not come, or sometimes you want to just double him on catch or double him on first dribble. Mix up the coverages, front the post, force them to throw the ball over the top and double them in that aspect. San Antonio is capable of hitting threes, but they don't take a lot of threes. But what we do know is that if you let LaMarcus play one-on-one, he is capable of having big nights. And last time these two teams played, he had 56 big points. I think OKC has to diversify their portfolio in the way they cover LaMarcus. They have to throw 3 to 4 different looks at him.
And it annihilated the smaller Jeremy Grant when Steven Adams was out as well.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Steven Adams, he's going to play, and that's a big thing for the Thunder because he's a strong presence inside for them. Let's take a look back on Thursday night. Russell Westbrook, always interesting how he's rolling into the stadium.
That's how we describing that outfit. Interesting.
Hoping to even catch up to where LaMarcus is at that point.
Yeah, you hate that. I always hated that when I go out of a game and then somebody else would get cooking and have to come back in and try to put out that fire. Boy, it can get tough. It can get tough at times.
And just looking at that box score, seeing a guy like Terrence Ferguson, 21.7-12 from the field, we keep saying with Oklahoma City, if they just had that third guy, right? And Jeremy Grant also with a really good game. Of those players, do you trust them to continue to excel and get better? Do you think that those guys have a higher ceiling?
Well, I think Jeremy Grant is almost among a very elite group of people in this league. There are 5 position defenders. They've used Jeremy Grant on everybody from 1s to 5s. And there are times like LaMarcus Aldridge where he's just too small to handle someone in the post, but he's having a career year. But I could be in the minority. I've always thought of them as a big 3. Even last year I thought of them as a big 3. It's just Steven Adams is the third in that group for me. At a bare minimum, he is a truly elite role player. At a bare minimum, in very much the same way that Draymond Green is for Golden State.
I think he's a high-level role player. I don't really see him in that big 3 because when I think of the big 3, I think of 3 really, really super dynamic offensive guys most of the time. Like when I think of, Golden State's big 3, I think of Clay, Steph, and Durant. When I think of OKC, I think of the big 2, and I think of Steven Adams being a super, super duper role player who plays his role to the best of his abilities. And so that's why I view him at. But to go to your point about shooting, I do think they still need an elite shooter. I like what Grant has done. I think he's improved a lot. To your point, Griff, he is a guy that plays tremendous defense and probably the most versatile defender in the league. But when you talk about a playoff series, and you talk about teams shrinking the floor against Paul George and Russell Westbrook, they're going to give guys like Ferguson, Grant, Schroeder all the jumpers they can handle because if you're a team, you're saying, hey, I know Paul George is good enough to beat me. I know Russell Westbrook is good enough to beat me. But I don't know if Ferguson can hit 3 out of 7 jump shots 7 games in a row in the series. I don't know if a guy like Schroeder, who's an excellent driver and gives them good minutes, I don't know if he can beat me consistently from the perimeter, and that is what teams will try to do, kind of similar to how OKC was built before Durant left, and they would make the guys like Robertson and Dion Waiters beat them because you know that you don't know, but you'll live with those guys beating you. I think they need a shooter.
Well, looking at their front line, Steven Adams with the ankle issue, he will play again tonight. But how do you view their depth? Let's say, for instance, you see him go down with the ankle. If he has an issue late in the season or if he gets into foul trouble in the game, what do you think of their depth up front?
Well, I like what Nerlens Noel brings, and hopefully he'll be back soon. We're hoping he gets a speedy recovery. That was a gruesome hit that he took. But I think Nerlens Noel gives them a little something behind Steven Adams. I like the way he's played this year. He's solid. He's not Steven Adams. He's not on his level, but he can give them something on the inside so they have a little bit of a post presence when Steven Adams isn't playing.
Patrick Patterson absolutely was not an answer for them the other night on LaMarcus Aldridge. The fewer minutes he can play in this particular matchup, the better. But again, in the absence of Nerlens Noel, they really don't have anything behind Steven Adams.
Certainly Steven Adams, you see him moving nicely, looking like he's going to be able to perform tonight for the Oklahoma City Thunder as they face the San Antonio Spurs. That last game on Thursday night, instant classic. What's going to happen tonight? We're going to find out in a few minutes. Slow down LaMarcus Aldridge, who scored 56 points against them, a career high on Thursday night. And on the flip side of that, do the Spurs have an answer for one PG-13? Paul George averaging over 30 in his last 11 games. Speaking of a recent run, congratulations once again to Coach Greg Popovich, who passed Jerry Sloan for third all-time in wins in NBA history. I mean, we know how great Pop's been, but just hearing that number is special. Now, Brendan, we talked about this almost a month ago when the Spurs finally looked like this great 2.5-decade run seemed to be slowing down. Since then, look at what they've done. Actually, 14-4 since early December. What do you see as being the key to that turnaround, Brendan? I mean, we sat here and thought, wait, is this finally it happening? And you said, nope, can't rule the Spurs out just yet.
You can never really rule the Spurs out just because Pop is going to find a way to do Pop-type things. And that just means that he's going to tinker and play around with the lineup and play around with their style of play until he finds what fits for that unit. And that's why I give Pop so much credit. A lot of coaches can't do that. Not that those coaches aren't good. They just know what they know, and they coach really well inside their box. I've had some coaches that they know the Princeton offense or the triangle offense, and that's all they know. Greg Popovich, he can change it up. He can run some triangle principles. He can run some individual post principles. He was the godfather of this ball movement era. He can do many different things, and he's found a way to spark this team. And a lot of it is by getting LaMarcus involved, of course, getting DeMar involved in good areas. I think Forbes at the point guard has really helped solidify things. And they're not shooting a lot of threes, but they're getting quality threes, and they're knocking those three downs. And the most important thing, they've become better defensively. At the beginning of the year, defensively, the Spurs were a joke. Now they're back to being the respectable defensive team they have been for the last decade.
Yeah, I think they bought in on a style for sure, and it starts with LaMarcus Aldridge. They are playing through LaMarcus almost every possession one way or the other. DeMar DeRozan is really being taken advantage of from a playmaking perspective, much more so even than the scoring aspect of what DeMar does. He's really gotten the ball moving to a point where everyone they bring in off the bench is getting really good looks. You saw in that graphic, they're leading the league in that span in three-point shooting. Davis Bertans coming in shooting 52% during that span from three. Bellinelli's shooting 46%. Bryn Forbes is shooting 44%. So they're getting contributions all throughout that roster. But the other thing Pop does, to your point about being able to do almost anything, he's going to play the guys that are playing well.
Right.
No one is sacred in a Pop run situation. If you're not getting it done, you sit down and he plays someone else who will. And I think you've seen that entire team now brought their defensive intensity because they understood if they didn't, they weren't going to play. It's a rare thing you can do when you've got the roster they have.
And you say the roster that they have because for years the names ring bells, right? Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and even Kawhi Leonard. None of those names are there. And when we look at this roster, you'd think LaMarcus Aldridge has never really proven it in the postseason. DeMar DeRozan, we know he's struggled in the postseason. Do you have faith that this group of guys can get it done in the playoffs when you look at this Spurs roster?
What do you mean by get it done?
The way it's currently constructed. Do you
when you say get it done, win one
series,
win multiple. In the Western Conference, they have a shot. They have a shot. Like, I can't say, because the Western Conference, I don't really have faith in anybody outside of the Golden State Warriors. I have questions. Even the Denver Nuggets, who are #1 in the Western Conference right now, those young guys for the Denver Nuggets have never been in a playoff series. So I have no confidence in anybody outside of Golden State to win multiple series because I don't know who's going to look like what, how teams are going to look as far as when the lights get the brightest in the playoffs because there's so many different teams that are so close. When you look up in the win column, you could clearly see a 6 knocking off a 3 this year because you don't know what the confines of that matchup's going to look like, and you don't know who's really going to have the advantage. Like the Lakers could be a 7 seed, and if the Lakers took on Denver with a healthy LeBron James, guess what? It might be advantage LeBron James. So it's just one of those things you never know where it's going to go in the Western Conference. So the Spurs right now, they're jumbled up with a lot of teams underneath the Golden State Warriors where I don't know what I'm going to get.
It's interesting that you mentioned that 6-3 because last year we saw the New Orleans Pelicans behind a great series with Anthony Davis do just that. And when you look at what you said, LeBron James as being LeBron James, you always got to consider him to be a guy you pick in a series. But the Spurs don't have that type of player, as you say, pole one type of player, right, Griff? So do you see this roster, or is Pop just that great that they can do it without a pole one player?
Well, Pop is special good, and that's not a surprise. We showed the graphic. He's third all-time in wins, and he's been special good for 20 years. I think what's interesting about their roster, and we talked about it briefly just a moment ago, teams are not used to defending the post on a regular basis. The game is being played so differently now everywhere else to a huge degree. What Pop is doing is zigging when everyone else zags, and he's playing two bigs all the time. Very often he's got LaMarcus and Jakob Poeltl together on the court. Poeltl has enabled LaMarcus to actually be serviceable on the defensive end as well because he's covering up a lot of the mistakes. Early on in the season when this team was really struggling defensively, they were struggling to get any stops when LaMarcus and Powell were on the court together. And Pop put in Jakob and started getting a much better defensive contribution from his 5, which then enables LaMarcus to focus on what he does best. So I think one of the things about a Pop-run team is, again, he's going to find a way to get them their most efficient shots. Some teams are all about what the most efficient shots are across the board. Houston, they're going to shoot threes. They're going to try to shoot layups. They're going to try to get to the free throw line. We don't shoot pull-up 2s. DeMar DeRozan leads the NBA in pull-up 2s, but that's what he does, so Pop lets him be good at it.
Time for the road ahead, presented by Dodge. Starting with tonight's game in Oklahoma City, the Spurs play 5 of their next 7 away from San Antonio. So it's going to be an interesting run for the Spurs to try to maintain their recent streak and head it in the right direction and continue to climb the Western Conference standings. On the Thunder, they've lost 3 in a row. Their defense has been lackluster. How can they once again get back to that level where they were earlier in the season defensively? And by earlier in the season, Brendan, we're just talking about a couple of games. It's not like they've been horrible on defense for an extended period of time.
Well, they're still like you said, they're still a very good defensive team. They had a little bit of a letdown these last couple of games, but I think this just comes down to getting back to fundamentals, the basics of their slides defensively, understanding where you want to shade people, where your help is going to be, paying attention to game plan, little things, detail-oriented things that sometimes when you get to the January, February part of the season, you have guys, especially younger guys, start to forget certain, we're forcing this guy this way, or the help needs to be over here. Those little things become big things. But I have no problem with OKC's defense. I have an absolute faith that they'll be fine defensively because they have a lot of really good defensive players. Russ is competing defensively. Paul George might be the best two-way wing in the league, and we know Steven Adams always brings his hard hat and his lunch pail.
And, of course, the Orlando Magic, Boston Celtics.
To move forward as long as everything's feeling good. So we're not. Our thoughts right now are on the Utah Jazz and really how we're going to try to win this game tonight. And we have all the confidence that LeBron and Mike, who's back with them, and the rest of the trainers he's working with right now are getting him healthy.
Hello again, basketball fans. Welcome to Game Time Live, presented by State Farm. Rick Campbell with champions, Steve Smith and Brendan Haywood. We're here on a 9-game Friday, and we just heard from Lakers coach Luke Walton about LeBron James, who's missed the past 8 games with a strained left groin. He is going to miss, as we have heard, at least the next 3 games. So, guys, let's take a look at the Lakers' next 7 games. So we know he's not playing tonight. He's not playing Sunday against the Cavs. He's not playing Tuesday against the Bulls. He might be able to return Thursday at OKC on TNT. How many wins do you see here, Smitty and B. Wood?
You know, you talking about those first 3 games, or you talking about this 7-game
whole
run
thing.
right here? I see right now, if he's not back, I mean, that's a tough stretch when you start talking about at Thunder, at Rockets, and Warriors. So if without LeBron James, out of the 7, I see them winning 3.
And I see it like a spades hand. I see 3 in the possible. There's a possibility tonight against the Utah Jazz, and then you see teams like the Cavs on there, the Bulls, and the Timberwolves. So I see 3 in the possible.
I got 3.
So, LeBron James, as we say, he may be able to come back next Thursday. There's no promises on that. And as Luke Walton said, he's working with his team to try to get back. This injury obviously dates back to Christmas. So, B. Wood, I'll start with you. How long can the Lakers afford to be without LeBron James and still realize their goals of making the playoffs?
Well, I think it comes down to, first of all, how good this team continues to play and which Lakers team we see. Are they going to be the team that, didn't perform well? They're going to be the team that gets these W's. But at the end of the day, I think by the time, if he's back by the time they play Minnesota or sometime before that, I think they'll be just fine. And if they can find a way to hover around 500 in those games, because right now they're 23-19, they're sitting in the 8th place. If they can hover around 500 as far as those wins in those next couple of games, they'll be fine. But the problem is if they snowball and they lose a bunch of games in a row, you know how it is in the West. It's not like the East. In the West, if you lose 3 or 4 games in a row, you can go from 8th to 13th really, really quickly.
Yeah, and I look at it, B. Wood said it best. The one thing is I think they have to fight against is, and I know LeBron James won't rush back, but do you want 100%, not 100%, a healthy LeBron James coming back, whether that's 10 games from now, 15 games from now, or if you bring him back too early? So they're going to have to wait, and I know LeBron will wait. B. Wood said it best. They got to hover around 500, especially in these next 7 games. In 10 games, they got to go at least 500, because in the Western Conference, you lose 5 games. But if you lose 7 or 8, you could be sitting around 13th, 14th in the West.
Check out this intrigue tonight in Utah. The Jazz come in 9th place. The Lakers are in 8th place, separated by 2 games. But let's talk LeBron and DMPs and possible MVP. Of course, last year played all 82 games. This year he has missed 8. He's going to miss at least 3 more. That puts it at 11. Here are the fewest games played by an NBA MVP. Walton back in 77-78 played 58. Iverson 71. Harden last year 72. And Nash in 04-05 played 75. Just don't ask Shaq about that. So how many games, Smitty, can LeBron miss and still win MVP?
Bill Walton played only 58, right? So I'm looking at it. Bill Walton played 58. I think for LeBron, reasonably, I think he can't miss more than 15 games. But the numbers he's put up, if he can come back and he's only missed 15 games and they can shoot up to around 3rd place in the West and he put up tremendous numbers, he has a chance. But there's some other guys, no matter what, and all the other guys we talked about MVP. But I think 15 is the number for me, B. Wood.
Yeah, I think I'm right in there with you. Somewhere between 15, they might give him 20 just because he's LeBron, if he's doing something spectacular. Like if he were to get the Lakers, let's say, to the 3rd seed or the 2nd seed, something that we did not foresee at the beginning of the season, and he missed 20 games, I think he'd have a really strong shot at it. But I'm with you. I think that number's closer to 15. But more importantly, the Lakers have to win basketball. They can't be the 8th seed or the 7th seed. They have to be somewhere within the top 4 to even have a chance, because there's a lot of really deserving candidates when you start talking about Kawhi and Giannis and Harden. There's some big names, Paul George.
Jokic.
The Joker's in there. I don't think he really has a true shot to get it, but I think he's up there.
Oh, I'm with
Do you
B.
think
Wood.
he has a true shot to get it?
He's playing extremely well. And let's not say we're not saying he's not playing well, but I think when you just start to come down to being realistic, unless he can go on a tremendous run, I think he's played extremely well. They have to stay in 1st or 2nd for him to get it. But when you start looking at those big names, it's going to be Harden, Giannis, Kawhi, all those guys. I don't think he has a shot.
When you say that Jokic probably can't get it, it's not disrespecting him. He is doing phenomenal things. 18 and 10, 7 assists, helping lead this team, even though they've been through a lot of injuries. The thing is, there's a lot of other guys on really good teams that have these incredible numbers. When you talk about Giannis, Giannis is 27 and 13, and they're the best record in the NBA. And then you have what Kawhi Leonard is doing from a two-way standpoint and still getting you 26 points per game. And Toronto's playing well. So the Joker's in the mix somewhere, probably top 7 to 8.
7, 8, yeah.
But when you talk about actually winning the award, it's going to be hard, like unless he goes on a run like Smitty said, because he's going to have to get his numbers into that category. MVP isn't just about wins. It's normally about the best combination of next level stats combined with the wins, and that's how you get your MVP.
I totally agree with that outlook on MVP. And the Sixers come into tonight's